put yourself in a position where you can't retreat, where it's do or die, sink or swim. Here's what you'll find out. You'll develop incredible swimming skills. You'll find yourself stroking unlike you've ever seen before. Through the inspiration of desperation, you'll become more creative than ever before. Throw your whole self into it. All you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough. But make sure you do all you can do.
Folks, Weekly Ramble. And I am here today again with my man, Billy Phillips. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. We're both rocking our new hats from the Dad Edge.
Yeah, nice hats.
Yep. So y'all have heard us talk quite a bit about masterminds and getting into networks of like-minded people to help us grow and just be better all around. We kind of wanted to seek out one. We've been intentional with this the last month or so, trying to find another mastermind that wasn't necessarily real estate focused, but more focused on mindset, parenting, right?
And, yeah.
Being a good husband, good friend, good person all around. And so we found, we were familiar with Dad Edge, and we know some folks that are in it. And so we got on a call with them, and we pulled the trigger a couple weeks ago, and now we're a member of that. So
yeah, I'm excited about this one.
Yep. Yeah. So and we've got some some folks that are in Legacy family with us too, that have been in the past or are in Dad Edge as well. So got some common ground there, but this will be a good one. But that's not what we're talking about today, just pointing out the hats. And Larry from Dad Edge, thanks for the hats, we appreciate you. Today we're going to talk about, it's an idea or mindset around a book that you're reading. I haven't read the book, but it's a statement that I've always said about myself, just kind of how I handle everything. But the name of the book is Ready, Fire, Aim. So we're going to dive into our thought process around that and let you kind of open it up with a little bit about the book.
Yeah, and there is a book on it, and I don't know if that was the first place the terminology came from, because we've heard it a lot. You've used it a lot around Ready, Fire, Aim, and really the premise of, if you're going to go do something, don't wait until the moment is perfect to do it, right? And basically that's saying you're ready and then you're aiming. You can aim forever, but if you never fire and you're never out there really kind of pulling the trigger on what you want to do, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's more so get in motion and learn as you go.
Yeah.
And the book, it kind of hits on all of that, but it's really, the book itself is more about different stages of building a business and what they mean. He breaks it up between $1 million business, a $10 million business, I think $10 to $50 million, and then 50 plus. So 4 different stages of business and what you should be doing in each stage of business. And probably half the book is allocated to kind of that ready, fire, aim mentality of initially growing a business and getting it to, your first $1 million a year of revenue, and basically goes into the fact of, don't wait till your systems are perfect. Don't wait till you have all the processes and procedures and everything in place. Just go sell. Just hit the ground running, sell. Because if you don't have customers, you don't have anything. And I mean, we obviously have been in that. We worked for companies that were very well established, and the entrepreneur world and the starting a business world is a whole lot different. And I know we do the best we can to take on that mentality.
Yeah, and it's like just sell, but just act. Like get the ball moving down the hill, and and then it will gain momentum. And I naturally, just because me personally, the way my brain works, if I hang up on something too long, then I don't move, and so I just naturally over the years, just through realizing about myself, if I have an idea, I just got to get it going, and that comes with some negatives sometimes, because sometimes I get things going that aren't well organized, or I don't have the resources to continue them going, or just things kind of get a little fuzzy and blurry and they don't go anywhere. But the net result overall is a positive because I get a lot of things going, and I do. So out of 10 things I get moving, maybe 2 good ones work out, and those 2 good ones working out, well, none of them would have worked out if I didn't get those 10 going, So that's always been my philosophy. And it's another book called Everything is Figure Outable. And just that saying itself is, it's kind of like, again, ready, fire, and we can figure out everything else from there, right? And both of us have, I'd say, high levels of confidence in our ability to figure things out and know when to abort mission or like we need to keep moving. And that confidence gives us even more confidence to take the leap into things.
Yeah.
Great example, us leaving our jobs. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit, but go ahead.
Well, and I guess it's confidence and mindset around it, right? And I have definitely fallen into the trap of, several times over my career and, building a real estate business, of getting, bogged down in whether it be the day-to-day or like the planning of what we're going to do to make sure we're doing it right? And as in the book, they would say, as a stage 1 entrepreneur, where you're trying to grow a business, which is really the crux of that ready, fire, aim, you got to get out of those weeds. The systems, build as you go, and we talk a lot about this building our fund, and we did, spend a lot of time making sure we had some good systems in place, right? And, spending a lot of time on that. But when we look back at like each week, what percentage of time do we spend like in our business building our systems versus going to get customers, right? And I can definitely look back and say I spent a lot of time building our systems and all, when there should have been more time, going and getting customers.
Yes. But one difference, like when we're talking specifically about the fund or anything that involves us essentially managing investors' capital,
It's got to be right.
It has to be right. Yeah. So in those situations, like with our fund, it was not a ready, fire, aim.
Right.
Like we spent a lot of time mapping that out because we knew for that model to work, we were going to be bringing in capital from other people. And if you're doing that and they're of the mindset that we haven't figured this thing out, right, then it doesn't, the model fails right in the beginning. That's so true. That's why we spent a lot of money, a lot of time hiring a consultant
to expedite it,
and hiring a good marketing firm and things like that. So, the specific to the fund, we had a little bit there were so many variables with the fund that could have tripped or held us up just because they're intimidating and it's a lot of hurdles to get over. So we did, in a sense, ready, fire, aimed, but we had a pretty good bead on what we were aiming at before we fired.
Yeah, and you got to have systems and processes. It's more so of having kind of the systems and processes in place to where you get bogged down on it. So the way we did it was to make sure that we could put them in place so it didn't bog us down early on, right? Yeah. But still, sometimes you do get bogged down in some of those details, even though your systems are in place, right? Because you want to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's really more about, focusing on, all right, you're good with what you got, go out there and sell the product. Yeah. It doesn't have to be about our business, but just any business. You have the product, and whether let's go to the product. So let's say we're selling, I don't know, I'm looking at one, so couches, right? And you've got what you think is the perfect couch, right? Or it's not quite perfect, but when it's perfect, you'll go sell it, right? And you might spend 18 months trying to figure out what is the most comfortable way that I can make this couch. And in that 18 months, you never go try to sell it, right? and it's more so about you don't know what your customers want until you sell it to them, right?
Right.
So if you're going out with a new product, a new couch, and you love it, and you spend so much time, so much money, so much, I'll say money and marketing, getting everything ready, and then you go to sell it, and people don't think it's comfortable as you did. They don't like that, right? You wasted all of that time when, from the beginning, you should just go sell the couch you had, and as you get customer feedback, you figure it out as you go along the way, right?
Yep.
So that's a much better example.
Great analogy.
And really what the book goes into is don't overthink your product or your processes or your systems, because you don't know until you go sell it to that customer whether or not that's what they're going to accept. Because ultimately, to have a successful business, doesn't matter if you like it or not. Your customers have to like it.
Right. So as you're saying that and giving the couch analogy, it kind of gave me clarity on something that's very relevant to us and our business, and that's the podcast. This podcast right now.
Yeah.
So this chair is gonna drive me crazy. It keeps, like, I want to be taller than you, but it keeps sinking down and I get shorter than you. What was I saying? Podcast.
I didn't know you had such an inferiority complex there.
Well, I'm taller than you, so I want on
But
camera.
you're not.
I am in real life.
You're not.
Standing up. Anyway,
I hunch. You
yeah,
gotta stand up straight.
but the podcast.
Yeah.
So how many people, since we have started the podcast, so we're 50 episodes, about 6 months into this. How many people have said, I know several to me, I know you've heard it too, but have said, man, that's great. I love y'all's podcast. I bought all the equipment. I was thinking about starting one, and I bought all the equipment, and it's sitting in a box. Or how did y'all get a podcast started and get everything uploaded? Well, the reality is we had no clue what we were doing, nothing, right? And there's a lot of hurdles to get over that we could easily say, we got to wait until we have a nice camera. What are we recording on right now? An iPhone, right? We got to have a nice mic. I went to Best Buy and bought this mic sitting here on this table. It's cheap.
Yeah.
We got to know how to chop it up into reels, and we got to have the best guests, and we got to have all this stuff, to blow the podcast up. We got to have sponsors. No, we don't need any of that to record something on an iPhone, get the audio decent enough people can hear it, just to get the ball rolling. We will then get it rolling, and as we are doing, initially we were recording on the iPhone, like the audio.
Yeah.
So now we got a mic.
Yeah.
Now we're realizing, okay, we're getting a little bit of an audience, and we're starting to get some influential guests that have audiences. So now, as that grows and we start to get a better, vision on where we're aiming, we can start dialing it in and making it a little bit better production, and it will evolve. If we didn't jump into it and we had waited until we had the resources to go buy a $1,000 camera.
Until the timing was perfect.
Yeah, exactly. We would have never gotten started.
Right.
And that's a great example of we just dove into it, and all we had to do is just figure out how to get something recorded. It sounds good enough for people to hear, and get it up on the radio or whatever platform it is,
Yeah. I mean, that is the baseline of Ready, Fire, Ready.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example. Because a lot of the people you reach out to when we're starting a podcast is other people that have been thinking about doing podcasts, right? And what they were looking at for equipment, and a lot of times haven't gotten started. And using real estate as an example, it's a great example because it's hard to go buy your first house, right? A house is expensive, right? It's not like you're going out and buying a four-wheeler, right? You're making a purchase of a six-figure purchase, and your first one. So many people get caught up on that first deal, right? And we did it for a certain extent, right? When you think about all the units that we bought, like I remember that first one for me, it took about a year. It took about a year to get that first one, and a lot of that was just looking at deals, and to get that first one, there was probably 4 of them that I didn't do, and in hindsight, maybe 2 out of those 4 I should have, because of that fear of getting started and the fear that everything's not perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Because you say you're going to spend $100,000 on something, the fear can jump in and say, well, you might lose $100,000. It's getting past the point of realizing that piece of property is always going to have value, but it's more so that first deal I did is still one of the best deals I ever did, and I almost walked away from it because I didn't think all the stars aligned, right? Because I didn't get $2,000 off of the price because the HVAC is going to cost a little bit more, you know, things like that. But it's just getting through that hurdle of everything having to be absolutely perfect, that it can't go wrong. Because if you live in that bubble, you're never going to do it, right? It's never going to happen. And the first deal was the perfect example, because it was like, all right, no matter what, I'm going to go buy this house. You did the same thing. I'm going to go buy this house. And then the next thing you know, it's snowballing. All because we did that first one just because we got started.
Yeah.
Right? Just because we got started.
Yeah, and specific to real estate, there's just a lot of things about, like, through the transactional process of getting a deal done that you got to go through to experience it. And then you're like, that wasn't that bad. And the next one, that wasn't that. It's like anything you do in life, the more reps you have, the easier it gets.
Well, and I'll go back to the podcast, because real estate's a good example. We're buying a house, because everything to negotiating, to finding an attorney, an agent, an inspector, and getting all these things done seems super daunting, right? Like, how am I going to do this? I don't know what to do. It's because you don't know what you don't know. The podcast, I know, thank God for you, because getting into the podcast, it seemed super daunting to me. Right? Like, how do you get going on a podcast? And I don't know if you remember exactly what we did, but, you know, I think it was around, we talked about a podcast for a year, but it was always kind of a way down the list type of thing. One day we'll do that. And we're talking in the YMCA parking lot one day, and you're like, we're going to do this podcast. Like, we're launching all of our marketing around our business come January. I want the podcast to go along with it. I'm like, oh, okay, this will be the 100th time we've talked about it. Let's get in our trucks and go home. And then in the next meeting, you brought it up again, but we set a date, right? We set a date.
That's right, we did. Yep.
That we need to have our first podcast episode out. I think it was by the first week of December was the goal. And that was September, maybe October. So we had like 2 months to get it done. And like anything else, we probably waited half of that to even get started on it. But we set a date and stuck to it. No matter what position we were in, whether we had the right equipment or not, and we released the first episode, you know? Yeah. And then if we hadn't set a date, that 3 months would have gone by and we would have talked about it again. Then another 3 months, and another 3 months, and you never get to it.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna bring it back to, you gotta have the confidence to figure things out, right? And like the podcast, if we made it 5 episodes and it just sucked and we decided it was too much work to do, we just shut it down. It's not a business right now. It's just something we want to do to, you know, try to share some value and talk to some cool people, right? And but the reason we're not scared to jump into those things, and again, we're talking about the podcast, but it can be anything. It could be real estate, it could be a new job, it could be going on a trip that you're nervous about, but you finally pull the trigger on it, you just go. You got to have a foundation. It helps to have a foundation of this ability to overcome adversity and the confidence that no matter what comes your way, you may sulk in it a little bit if it's bad, but you've got ability to pull yourself out of it and go right into, let's figure this thing out, right? And that comes through training. So like using sports as an analogy, you hear like high-level athletes talk about this all the time. When things get chaotic, I fall back on my training, right? And what does that mean? Let's talk about wrestling, right? and I'm just thinking about it because JJ wrestles, but they sit there and I watch them in practice drill the same move hundreds of times, over and over and over. And then they'll come back the next day and do the same move over and over. What are they doing? They're building a foundation of training that becomes habitual, that you, when things get chaotic and you're in a rough match or something like that, you're losing your mind, you fall right back to the thing you've drilled 100 times.
Right.
So you and I have been through adversity that we didn't have control over, you know, growing up. We've been through adversity through our corporate jobs that maybe we created for ourselves or was created for us, but we've had a lifetime of adversity, and instead of like whining or running from that adversity, we face it head on. We've gotten those reps, and our training has been, we know how to deal with adversity. So we're not scared to jump into anything because of what might happen, because we know we can face it head on.
Yeah, and we know we can, right? Because we've gone through it. But it is a muscle that you work through, but it's a choice you're making, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to victim mentality or whatever, but it's a choice that we're making to step away from our jobs, to build a business. You're making a choice that no matter what, hard things come my way, I'm gonna deal with it, and we're gonna get through it. And it is a muscle, but it's also a choice you have to make at some point, that you're gonna approach your life that way, right? And it's, we talk about it on here, and it seems easy. It's definitely not easy. Mm-hmm. You got to be prepared. It's more about, and I remember hearing this in the corporate world, that whenever something's very, very quiet is when you need to be most prepared.
Yeah.
Right. Something's coming.
Yeah.
And it's having the wherewithal to understand things are coming. So you get that email that, I don't know, you've got a septic issue at a house.
Yeah.
Right? That it doesn't just cripple you and shut you down. That you get that email, all right, it's not the first one I've gotten like this, it's not gonna be the last.
Deal with it.
Let's go figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. And you know me well enough to know, like, oddly, I get a little excited when things come up that we got, and it's annoying, I know, but I'm not always great with it, neither are you with adversity. You watched me, a couple weeks ago, I was having a difficult situation with an investment I'm in where I didn't react very well to it. Like, I lost my cool. I was in front of you. I never do that. But for a couple hour period, all the stuff that I talk about and all the positivity things that I preach, I lost it. Yeah. But it got chaotic, and I fell back on my training. So I was able to zoom back in, get it together after a few hours of not appropriate reaction, and dial back in and let's figure this out. Yeah. And that's, again, I fell back on my training, and that allows me to get into these things that a lot of people, and you're the same way, a lot of people would probably otherwise maybe run from. Yeah. We go head first and let's figure this out, because we know how to, and we're still figuring it out. Like, it's a work in progress. It will continue to evolve.
Right. There's going to be bigger, more complex problems that come our way, because if they're not, that means we're not growing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
If you're not getting harder problems to figure out, you're stagnant.
That's right. And when we bought our first apartment, I remember, I heard it on a podcast, or maybe it might have been Tim Rott said it to us, but your problems are going to be the same exact problems you had when you had single family. It's just got an extra zero on the end.
That's right.
Right? So instead of buying, 2 units, 2 houses, you just bought 20 houses all under one roof. Instead of having to write a $7,000 check to fix some plumbing under a house, you're writing a $70,000 check to fix a plumbing issue. It's just adding a zero to the end of it. So, So, we again, like all of our topics, we could talk for hours on this, and it ties into a lot of other mindset type of things. I have not read that book, although it's something I've said a lot. So when you get done with it, I'm looking forward to reading it. But Ready, Fire, Aim. It's just, that mentality is not for everybody. It's not.
It's not.
If you're someone that crumbles and that I'm not saying that in a negative way, but you aren't able to perform when shit hits the fan, and you haven't been able to prove that, then it's probably not a good idea for you to continue diving into things where you don't know what you're aiming at, right? Or don't know how to solve them.
You want to live a happy life,
right?
And if that stresses you out too much, and just the way you're wired, you know, that's okay, right? That's okay, you know. But the entrepreneurial world is definitely one where you got to keep moving forward no matter what, right? As soon as you become stagnant, that's it. Right? It's always you're growing or you're dying, right? And I think that, you know, the kind of the moral of the story is just don't wait till everything's perfect. If you're trying to grow something, you're trying to do something different, you want to do a podcast, you want to read, you know, 100 books this year, you have to get going.
Yeah,
right?
don't wait till you have your library filled with 100 books.
Right.
Start. Like just get one and start.
That's
you know?
right.
It's right. And we'll wrap this up here in a little bit, but we both do it too, where we set these little, whether it's around like personal goals or business goals, we set these short-term goals, right? And that's what we want to do, and we get started towards them. We don't always complete them, you know, and it's but we try. Like we're constantly trying something new and trying to move the needle. And if you're not doing that, to your point, you're not growing. You can't sit stagnant, so you're dying. There's no stillness, you know, and dying in the sense of you're not moving the needle, you're not growing mentally, physically, all that. So, but we'll wrap it up with that. Ready, Fire, Aim. It's a great mentality. I'm sure it's a great book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And that'll wrap up another episode of Burning the Boats Weekly Ramble, sponsored by 608B Capital. See you guys next time.